Thank you, Patrick. Okay, before we excuse you for the day, we do have one special guest in the room today who has been a big supporter of the TDA since its inception. Over the last few years, he has disagreed with a couple rules we had, but in the meantime, I'd like to give a nice big round of applause to this gentleman in the back of the room, the all-time money winner and Hall of Famer, Daniel Negreanu.
This one here? I'm going to keep this short and sweet. There'll be no tournament. So, first I just want to start by saying that in all of sports, the best referees are the ones that you hardly notice. They're not at the heart of every controversy. They're not ruining the game. They're letting the players play, and they do their job effectively. What I wanted to talk about a little bit is what is the role of a tournament director? What industry are you in? First and foremost, customer service. The players are not inmates and you're not prison guards, despite some emails I've read amongst the TDA who said, I actually read this, it said, we can't let the inmates run the asylum. Okay? Let's be clear that it's the players, when they pay their buy-ins, that go to the casino, eventually pay the paychecks of everyone in this room for the most part. Aside from customer service, game security, game integrity, logistics are all part of your role as a tournament director, right? And of course, there's a balancing act sometimes between game security and customer service, right? We make some sacrifices sometimes for game integrity. We all know that in today's day and age, cell phones could be used as a cheating device. We don't ban those because that just wouldn't work for players. We allow headphones, which we also know can be used as a cheating device. We use sunglasses. We allow sunglasses, despite knowing full well that you can buy sunglasses online for $50 to $100 that are able to see marked cards and daub and use to cheat. We allow these things because we're thinking about the customer first. So we make these sacrifices. So we know that there's evidence that we do this in other areas. Obviously, I know that some of the players have talked a little bit about the first card off the deck rule. This is another one of those types of things. The question is, the man wearing sunglasses using daub to cheat, the person using headphones getting an RFID to cheat, are we really focusing on the guy who runs around the table really fast to look at players' cards to see whether or not they can get an advantage? Like the real cheaters, I know that Matt Glantz, we were just talking about this, been playing 20 years. All the angle shooters and cheaters I've known in 20 years, they don't use that method. They're going to use a lot of other methods that we're totally okay with, right? But that's not really what I wanted to talk about. What I want to talk about in general is, again, back to the role of a TD tournament director and some of the ticky-tacky penalties that we implement in situations that I believe wholeheartedly we should have much more of a warning system in place first. I'll give you two quick examples. One is an amateur player who's playing Omaha. It's sometimes a complicated game. He flops two pair. He's in last position. There's some bets or whatever. The river card's a flush. Check to him. He checks. He says two pair. Doesn't even realize he has the nut flush. Well, the rule says if you check the nuts in position, you get a penalty. So not only is this player penalized by the fact that he's lost value, and he's made a mistake, he's actually going to get a one-round penalty. That's just seems silly. The other one that comes up sometimes as well is the player bets the flop, doesn't see that someone called, wants to show the table his cards. He shows his hand, right? Just to show the table. And now, if you're not a poker player, you wouldn't understand, but it's very difficult to win when someone can see your whole cards. So he's already penalized himself by showing the cards, right? Now, on top of that, and I've seen this over and over, consistently, this player who made this mistake, and of course I understand that it's the player's responsibility not to make these mistakes, but a player who makes this mistake, typically an amateur, is now not only penalized by the fact he has to play his hand face up, he's also getting a one-round penalty in addition to that. So the way I'm looking at it is this. When you approach a situation where you're thinking there's a penalty that should be assessed, approach it this way. How can I justify not giving this person a penalty? How can I justify saying, this person probably wasn't cheating. We'll give this player one warning, and it will let him know, if this happens again, you will get a penalty. There are going to be some egregious situations where someone absolutely deserves a penalty on first go. But far too often in tournaments that I've seen across the world, especially in Europe, on the European Poker Tour events, they're by far the worst perpetrators of this. Penalties are given rampantly for situations that are not breaching the integrity of the game. They're simple player errors. And, aside with that, the whole first card off the deck rule, we talk about balancing game integrity and customer service. As tournament directors, we would think that we want to avoid, at all costs, killing a customer's hand. A businessman who takes a phone call, walks away from the table because he knows he's not allowed to speak on his phone, speak on the phone at the table, turns back in his big blind, first card's dealt, and his hand's dead. What we really want to do is kill the least amount of hands, right? We're in the customer service industry, right? So I ask, before this rule was implemented, how many of your customers were complaining about the last card off the deck rule? How many of them were complaining? How many do you believe would complain if you used the last card off the deck rule? I've never heard one. I've been playing 20 years, and I know all the other players have as well. So in line with the idea that we're in the customer service industry, is this really the issue? The first card off the deck, last card off the deck rule, is this the one that is the bone that breaks the camel's back, that is so important to you that you really believe all the cheaters in the game are using this tactic to walk behind players? Do you really, really, truly believe that? And if not, why not think about what the players want? The vast majority. Dan O'Brien, of course, did a poll amongst amateur players during the Millionaire Maker and the main event. It's not even close when you talk to those that tour the professionals and stuff like that. It wouldn't even be close to a 3-1 favorite. So really, is this the stand? Is this the one issue that is so beholden to you, that you care so much about in terms of game integrity, you're willing to sacrifice customer service and what the players want, that you stand in that position? And that's all I've got.
Daniel, thank you. Here, don't go away. Don't get off the stage.
Okay.
Okay, here's the part I don't understand. You cite these as cases where there are auto penalties for things like, you gave 2 examples. If you check the nuts in last position and and you gave the example of the older player who might not realize he has it, and you said he's going to get a penalty. That is not a TDA rule, and I've told you it's not an auto penalty. There is, and the other one about exposing a rule. Our rule is a penalty, exposing a card. A penalty may be invoked. So we are on your side. Nobody here wants to penalize people, Calm down, Linda. So, these are not automatic penalties.
But here's what
and you
happening.
keep saying that they're automatic penalties.
They're given automatically. What
They're
I'm
not.
saying is I've never seen discretion used.
They're not.
I've never seen discretion used once on the APT. I've never seen it done even at the World Series of Poker or the WPT. Every single instance of one of those things happening has been given a penalty 100% of the time, despite players at the table saying, "Oh, he just misread his hand." So I understand that it says may, but it's not being enforced in that way. So clearly there's a disconnect in terms of what the rule is written and the way that it's being enforced.
Never given a penalty for that, ever. I've never given a penalty for that. I warn them.
Do you guys, okay, as far as I know, the only thing that we give automatic penalties for are collusion. So if you were to walk up and say, why didn't you bet the nets on the river? And you said, he's my friend, I don't want to bust him, he's getting a penalty. If you say, I didn't realize I had it, you're 80 years old, there's a very good chance that, how many of you would give a penalty in the second case here? Okay. Thank you.
It's not what happened. It's just simply not what's
Because we're
happening
on your
practically.
side.
Right.
None of us want to be, the policeman at the table and, do that. We're not.
Right. Well, what I'm saying is, in practice, that is what's happening. It happened at least 5 times at this World Series of Poker. It happens at every EPT that I play on. So somehow there's a disconnect between the rule the way it's written, which I acknowledge that it says may, but for some reason it's not being enforced in that way. There's never been any leeway. It's always simply, well, he checked the nuts. Yeah, that's a penalty. There's no what was his intent, which should matter a lot more. Because typically what we're doing when we do that is we're penalizing the amateur players. The pros are not the ones who make these mistakes. It's the amateur recreational players who do.
Okay, so I think we're all in agreement with what he's saying, right? I mean, that we're not out there just trying to penalize people for no reason. If it's a decision that somebody's done that affects the game negatively, then you may have to give a penalty. But if you have discretion, you're going to go with Rule 1, the fairness rule, and make your decision based on that.
Excellent. And along those lines, in terms of tie goes to the runner type situations, we play a game called Triple Draw. It's 5-card game. Often we have on the EBT we have these little water bottle areas where you can leave the table, go fill up your water bottle, right? So if the water bottle machine's over there and your table's over here, you go over there. By the time the hand is over, you never know when the hand's going to end. By the time that happens, dealer shuffles and deals the first card versus the last card in a lot of these situations gives it about another 5-10 seconds. So that player who's finishing up his water can see the hand's been mucked, it's over, he can walk back to his table and safely get his hand. What we're doing now on the EPT is that player has much less time to react to the situation and get back to his table. Sometimes even before he gets a card, he could be on the button, walk up to his table, the first card, second card's dealt, he doesn't even have a card yet, and we're killing that player's hand because he went to go get a drink of water. It's just silly. It's gotten to the point where it's absurd. This was not something that any of your customers were asking for. This was something that was forced on them because Neil Johnson decided, along with other tournament directors, that this was going to be a good idea. It's true. I mean, that's what happened. There was no clamoring. I'd never heard any player ever once say, you know what, we need to change this rule. Never happened once.
Going back to the first part of Daniel's concerns, and we appreciate that you come down here and talk to us. For those, I don't know how many actual tournament directors in the room. So if you're a tournament director, an active tournament director, or in the recent past, would you raise your hand? Okay, just so we get an idea. Now, with your hand still raised, those of you who have never given a penalty, keep your hands raised. Okay, so there still are some. And those of you who have given penalties, in the situations where you could have given a penalty or not, is it like more than 50% that you do or more than 50% that you don't? I mean, I know that when I ran tournaments, I literally gave one penalty in all the tournaments I ran. I'm sorry? I hear. 2 a year. If you give 2 penalties a year, that's a lot. So I think your perception may be that they're giving all these penalties, but maybe those are the tournament directors that don't care enough to come here and really learn and understand the rules. And there's nothing that we can do to make them do their jobs well.
Very valid point. And there's, I play European Poker Tour, the WBT, and the WSOP. So I cannot speak intelligently about what happens in your local events. What I'm saying is, in the ones that I do play, this is what I'm seeing. Like I said, more prevalently on, oddly enough, events run by poker stars are the ones that are the worst perpetrators of these types of penalty situations. It also does happen at the World Series of Poker as well, and the WPT. But the disconnect, again, is from what you're saying and what these people here are acknowledging is that we all agree that this isn't the way that they should be enforced. So the disconnect is where I'm playing, and I know that other players who are higher profile are playing on the bigger events, that is what's happening, typically. Yeah.
But I think we are on the same side.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. Yeah.
And 2 misconceptions. First of all, people think Daniel and I are not friends. That's not true. We have differences of opinions. No, I hugged him when he came in. We have hugged. But the second thing, I don't think it's fair to blame Neil Johnson for he's not the only one who, I don't think it's fair to blame him for that rule.
I said him and the other tournament directors that came up with that. I didn't just say him. But he's been the largest proponent, clearly, of this rule, because it's a big issue for him.
But all the tournament directors did agree to try it.
No, I get it.
So it's not, it's no more just Neil than it was just Matt the other year, although Matt took a lot of heat and now you've kind of deflected it on Neil.
The only one that I saw on Twitter that said the following, said it's a better rule. If you disagree with me, essentially, you have that right to be wrong, right? And I find that offensive as a player. Well, you said this, it's a better rule, and then later you said you have the right to disagree with me. Well, if you're just blanketly saying it's a better rule, it's very condescending, very arrogant, and players do not appreciate that. They don't be appreciated told. They've been playing 20 years, they've been doing this game, they've seen both rules. If you say, I think it's a better rule, totally on board with that. But when you just say it's a better rule, who crowned you king of all poker knowledge? Who made you the guy who just knows everything better than the actual players who are playing the game?
My only comment is that's not entirely what I said.
I read Twitter. It said it on Twitter. You said it's a better rule. You didn't say I think it's a better rule. You said it is a better rule, which assumes superiority, condescension, arrogance, and I as a player don't appreciate it, and I know other players don't appreciate it as well. I know how to do arrogant and condescending. I'm quite good at it, but very good at it, so I can smell it when I see it.
If that's the way you took it, I do apologize. But in 140 characters, there is limits to what you can put in. In the discussion I was having with Dan O'Brien, and in deference to everyone on the board, Matt has said that he believes it's all of the people, you weren't in here when we took the poll, the people that have implemented the rule, they agree that they believe it's a better rule. We understand that there are players who disagree and don't. Matt Waxman was here, Matt was here, Dan O'Brien was here. We understand that there are players who don't believe that. But if apparently I should have put in, I believe it's a better rule, because I do believe it's a better rule. But I also want to clarify, as I said when we started the discussion, it's not my rule. For this perspective, I'm the face of Poker Stars. All the tournament directors that are within Poker Stars, all the live poker operations people that are within Poker Stars. So it's us, I guess, not me. But that is the consensus from everyone that's in there. So I do apologize if that's the way you took it. I would hope that you would know that that's not how I intended, but apparently that's how it came across. But that's not the intention of it.
Okay. You know, a rule that makes your job easier doesn't necessarily make it a better rule. A rule that the players appreciate, that the players want, the players prefer, is the rule that should trump the idea that it might make your job just a little bit easier.
So can we just all agree on one thing, though? So when it comes to rules and it comes to integrity of the tournament, it comes to directing the tournament, the penalties and punishing players isn't because we want to punish players. It should be to correct people that are continuously breaking the rules and exhibiting bad behavior, not ones that are actually trying to play the game and are mistakenly doing things that end up finding themselves in situations where they did something wrong, right? And I think the level in which we, actually administer those penalties, I think is important. And to Daniel's point, and I know he's very passionate about this, is that we really, nobody should be a Nazi, so to speak, when it comes to trying to deliver rules. We're all about fairness. We're all about the mission of what the TDA is all about. It's all about trying to make sure the game is ran properly. And so I think Daniel wants that. I think we want that. And I know there's going to be rules that the players and the TDs don't agree on, but we're going to continue to work through those. So I just wanted to say that.
Yeah. Thank you, Daniel. Again, I think we're on the same page with a lot of those things, and a lot of us want to have the game to be fun, and I think that you do a great job at that. You're an amazing ambassador for the game, and we appreciate it, and I appreciate you coming by.
All right. Thanks, guys.
Thank you, Daniel.